Well, good evening. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Chris Ravel. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at the Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts. And a fun fact, we learned tonight that no matter where I stand on this stage, I'm too tall, and I will be hit by the screen no matter where I move. So you'll get to enjoy that. If you can believe it, we have been working on this talk for just a little bit over 2 years. And it is an exciting conclusion to an incredible artist talk season that began with Shakaya Booker about 6 weeks ago. And to be honest, I don't know how many artist talks I've been to. I know that it's more than 50. I don't know if it's over 100. But I think that's a good number. I think somewhere in there, that's got to be good, because I think that these artist talks are essential. And no matter how much research, no matter how much you learn about an artwork or about an artist, there's nothing that can replace hearing from them directly. Hearing about their experiences, their ideas, their challenges, their failures, everything that happens in that studio process. And it helps us to appreciate their work and what they dedicate to it. And if we're lucky, it helps to change our perspective in the way that we view the world. And so when we were finalizing our program for the museum, I proposed a radical idea. I wanted to provide our guests with a once-in-a-lifetime experience that would take the scripts, the moderators out of everything, and let the artists just talk. And this conversation was something that was intimate and special, and it's something that might be a studio visit, something that could happen over coffee or a drink, but it was going to be rare, and we all knew it. And that's what's going to happen tonight. So we have some incredible artists for our first Undivided conversation, and these two artists are working in a range of mediums. They combine and assemble textures, plant life, architecture, machinery, fashion. And as you might see, that the work might begin with the body, but it's a way of questioning power and colonialism. It might be a way of looking at history, power, through beauty and love and violence. And also, they're world builders, they're storytellers, and they're combining their memories with folklore and mythology. And so I am extremely happy to share this night with you. So Firelei Báez just opened a show at the Louisiana Museum of Modern Art in Denmark. Her work can also be found in the Nelson Atkins and SF MoMA, as well as the Guggenheim in New York. Wangechi Mutu just recently closed a solo exhibition at the New Museum. Yeah, that's very fair. And her work can be found in the collections of the Brooklyn Museum, Tate Modern, as well as the Whitney. So if you could, please help me welcome Wangechi Mutu and Firelei Báez.
I took your pen, so I get to doodle during the talk.
No, you could do whatever you want.
That's amazing. So I don't know if I have the words to say what a wild gift it is to be on stage with Wangechi. Like, how often do you get to talk to your heroes for an extended period of time? And I think I have slightly kept it cool and not geeked out on her, on what an honor it is, but absolutely floored to be here with you. And Chris, thank you for making it possible for that to be here at all. So thank you.
You're very sweet, and we are kindred spirits. I'm so glad it's so easy to speak with you behind stage and now in front, and we hope that we can say and show a side of ourselves that is not always visible. We're both extremely dedicated, intensely introverted, and we love our work. So we don't often come out to the public to have these kinds of conversations. So I'm very excited. I'm glad it's you, and I'm glad I'm out here with this audience, because I think you guys are pretty special for coming out to see us too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a chilly day, feels like the beginning of the fall, and for you to take time to be here, we're really, really grateful for that. Grateful for you being here. I feel like, so for these conversations, because we are such introverts, we can go into whole eddies of information or rabbit holes, and that you guys will have to bear for a bit. But also as an artist, I feel like I have the lucky chance to ask you all the geeky questions about the studio in general. So I'll try to bring us back when we go into the deep rabbit holes of information. And likewise, if you feel like I meander too far into like astrophysics, then you'll be like, so what about the table in your studio?
I love astrophysics. I'll just come with you.
Okay. We can get loopy, but it'll be fun.
Let's do it. Yep.
So starting, I think out of all the things that we were talking about, how about we start with what keeps you going? And then we can go into the other ones. What keeps you going as an artist?
That's a good one, and different from where we said we would start. So what keeps it going? What keeps us going? What keeps me going? For me, going is going and leaving. And leaving, for me, is where all of it begins. I make my work about the place that I find myself. And often I find myself somewhere because there's a choice I've made about where I want to be and where I don't want to be. And I say that because the path to creative thinking and creativity and art curiosity and the kind of inquisitiveness that I respond to and that I put in my work didn't come naturally and easily. It came because I had to make decisions about a type of freedom I really wanted to assert, and a freedom I was pursuing. And so I really felt constrained as a teenager, and in many ways my response to that was to want to run away. And part of it was to find quiet places to just be myself, and part of it was to find a place where being a female African girl didn't feel like a crime or or some kind of a curse. And so I was raised in Kenya in the 80s and 90s, and it was not a great time for a lot of us, and it wasn't a great time to be a girl. And so I was lucky enough to be able to go to school in Wales, actually, and meet a teacher that cracked open this bizarre ability, this thing in me that allowed me to feel connections between every single thing that I like to do: music, writing, reading, drawing. I love drawing, but I love drawing the way I love walking, swimming, theater and performance,
all the gifts,
collecting things, all of that stuff. And once I saw that those things could be connected into essentially one type of activity, practice, and subject, it just blew my mind. And I was like, what do you mean all of this is potentially a way of living and breathing and making myself useful on this earth? And he's like, yep, you can do that, and that's art. Just find a spot and bring it all together. So that's what keeps me going, is realizing that I've kind of engaged with the thing that makes me feel most useful and most valued, but also value myself as a human being, and that I have something to offer, and that thing doesn't have to be, or doesn't have to make sense to anybody until I essentially birth or create or make that language by which to present myself. And I love that. What keeps you going?
It's definitely a reflection of that, where the making is, it's almost like a life force. I grew up in a very conservative Seventh-day Adventist household, and it just felt like a really tight squeeze with no breath of expression. And art, also we moved around so much, so art was always a place where I could be expressive, be illogical, and have a little pocket for myself. So even now, that same escape latch or escape valve is what art does for me, even when it's hard, and even when I couldn't have a space, or when there's no sleep for a deadline. The joy in that making process is a complete life force. It's a lifeline.
When you say you moved around, what do you mean? You moved to neighborhoods or country, or?
Oh, so we moved countries. I moved from the Caribbean to the United States, always in these really intense moments. So when we first moved to Miami, it was during Hurricane Andrew. When I moved to New York, it was during September 11th. I feel like of all the deities, there's Oya, and she is like storms, new beginnings, endings. And I'm like, why couldn't I have been the child of like pleasurable Oshun, or like gentle Oya? Like, why am I always coming into these spaces of intense revolution? And then I don't know if I'll ever be comfortable with that, but growing conscious of the fact that I am either being gifted or being made aware of what generation I'm part of, and what my work can function as, or what I can do as a human in that space, seems like a really big burden. I always think of that as being like if there's a speech bubble, the largest speech bubble on the Gen Z generation, like, my God, the babies have to deal with so much, and they seem to have this spiritual armor that they're coming in with, and I'm just like in awe when I see them actually put it in place, given all the parameters and what the world is having them enter with or through. Did I answer your question? I did tell you I was going to meander.
I'm like, well, let's keep going. No, I'm curious now. When you say, oh yeah, the deity that you feel that you are most of. Why?
Well, even when I try to be gentle, I feel like I am always in search of, if not truth, and I guess maybe truth is the right word, or like a truer alignment, because time is a construct, reality is a construct, and you're so aware of that, especially as a migrant, that what is considered beautiful and loved in one space is sometimes radically different from another. And if you're bridging both, how do you find a place of comfort? What does comfort mean if you are the epitome of what's not desired? How do you choose to transmute? Do you then work with a mask to enter these spaces? And I always think of that, of people who had to, there's so much in the US that is in an effort for assimilation just erased, And I feel like from Gen X to all the different generations after that, having the gift of being looser and truer and room to declare this territory, this self, this gender, like the nuance of self, there's a certain freedom that is now trying to be taken back, but that has been declared. Whereas a generation before, if you were anything but a certain normative self, whether you were Puerto Rican or Native American or anywhere from anywhere, you tried very hard to erase the language, erase the look, and just traverse the world in a mask almost.
There's this beautiful set of portrait pieces that you've done where every single face is obscured except for the eyes, and there's various silhouettes and different types of shape, hair, and so forth. Where did that come from? Was that part of that moment of...
Absolutely, yeah. That was from that feeling of reconciling geographies. It'll come up, but you'll see there are these... they were meant to reference the brown paper bag test from the United States. And if you've ever heard of them, you match or to blend in with white society in the United States. And that was something that is... There are still traces of that in who we consider acceptable within media, who gets to be a valent pop star or politician, or who do we give access to? And that those are the dregs of that are still within society. And I kept thinking of, in Latin America, there's always this phrase of, we don't have racism, we have a class problem. But if you go in time into it, you realize that the Spanish colonies had such a strict and very codified class system. There are these beautiful paintings called casta paintings, where if you are uninformed, seem like some of the earliest portraits of interracial marriage, but they were meant to show what your capacity was within society depending on your mixture. And each portrait was coded, had a name. So we have now, the words like mulatto or quadroon or etc. But they would have the words that are now just part of popular language in Latin America. A newscaster smile, if it's a certain broadness, like everything in the face is codified. Every single part of you is codified. So those portraits were meant to undercut that and leave the one space of agency, which is still the gaze. And there's this trick in portraiture where you can position the pupils just in a certain way so that they follow you no matter where you go. So each portrait has that, where you're engaged as a viewer and being seen back. So even though they were offering these two, so another one was called the fan test, which is from Latin America, or referencing these very psychologically violent spaces, cultural spaces. I wanted to give an escape route for both the viewer and the subject, which were self-portraits every day. I was trying to think of what would be my own Ankawara daily studio practice. What's a thing to warm up the hand and get you going?
Daily ritual that
yes.
you're likely to start the day off in a particular gesture and continue it the next day and the next day.
Just very strict parameters.
Right. Yeah, and identifiable. It's interesting how the body shows up in our work and in so many people's work that I value and love, and what the currency of the Black body means, what it has meant, and for me, how that body has followed me, this kind of phantom that not only speaks to the history of the people who I come from, but also speaks to the histories that we haven't yet dared to tell. And one of the things that I love about this one piece, which I'm forgetting the title of that I have of yours, is the almost invisible scale of these bodies, right? That for me mimics a kind of, or it represents a sort of a secret body hidden in the books, in the pages of the books, which for me are like layers of soil and land and words that haven't yet been spoken. But the body shows up in our work, and I want to dig into that literally and unbury what that means, because I know for a fact that I was deeply affected by images of bodies, but also the stories that my mother and she was the one who told us these stories, because in fact there's many other people who knew about them, but they'd taken oaths of secrecy because the freedom fighting movement, the Mau Mau in Kikuyu area, was such that the war between the colonialist British and our communities and our people needed to be fought in the most intense way. And if you kept the secret, which is that you didn't know where the rebels were, you didn't know any rebels, you didn't know anybody, and even if they were part of your family, you were not going to speak. You were on the side of the right side of the war, and if you didn't, you were a traitor, and traitors got killed and removed and disappeared. But what really struck me about those stories is, first of all, I've never seen these bodies. No one took pictures of them. No one has even exhumed these mass graves. But the land that we're from, which is fertile and green and lush and also farming land, is in an area where many of the paths that either my parents took to school or as you go towards a church or you walk up this hill are known to be sort of areas where there are mass graves. And so in some ways we have and certainly I know I have made work about the things that have disappeared that need to be represented, and that essence of ghostly fantasy, fiction, and haunting that I try to capture has a lot to do with the fact that we still have not given space to those particular stories. And I'm curious if your background, if your reflections and paintings and if your deity has allowed you to think in that way, or how do you come to the body? Because I see abstraction also, you dancing with the paint on the surface and almost you kind of disappear, the eyes and the body just is a smoke that we can't describe, but there is still in that the essence of figure, and I want to know where the body, where it sits in your
Yeah, so I think in that same way I kept thinking of the word haunting too. How so much of the worlds that we traverse are about sublimating all these histories, and then our relationship to the dead or the transition can really determine whether you're haunted or guided. And so much of existing in a space like the US, where we're so separated from death, where aging is criminal, where it is monetized, healthcare is monetized, a lot of that gives you this strange separation from the body and a fear of it acting in unruly ways. And so I've always wanted like a work like this, for instance, is meant to be of different farming settlements around the world, the Keris, and it's this jolly figure directing these jolly workers, and it just seemed haunting and haunted. And there's this word or a folklore of the ghost in Jamaica called the duppy, and you'll hear it in song. And just thinking of how would that ghost figure speak to each of the subjects within the original diagram. And I wanted every work of mine, whether minuscule or large, figurative or abstract, to be visceral and felt. There's so much content that seems or can feel opaque or inaccessible. And one thing that we all share is our physical selves and our interaction with the world, with the environment. We know what things feel like. Mm-hmm. And so to experience before you start conceptualizing, to bring the viewer in closer and then give them room, if they're generous enough, to go further, that's something that painting can do. But interestingly enough, in abstraction, I think I am being the most physical. I'm being the most, I'm quite literally leaving traces of my physical self, the breath of my arms, all of that, the detritus in the studio, the humidity in the air will show in how the paint will dry, the whatever insects were flying in the air that night will be trapped in the paint. And so it's like the most truthful geographic artifact I can give, whereas a painting is fully constructed. It is a tacit agreement of learned language. It's, painting is one of the most ancient ways of articulating that we have. So this is basically just an agreed upon lie. And painting, the abstracted figure is, even though it can seem opaque, it's like one-to-one, body-to-body kind of thing. Mm-hmm. What is your relationship to the body in that? Because there is, yeah.
No, for sure. The land is a big part of why the land I come from, and the place I was born, and the people who fought for the country, who are my people and our people, and the reasons why are a huge part of why I obsess on the massive uncelebrated strength of women, the gentleness and yet the patience and the power of the land. The two in relationship with one another, meaning the way that women have provided and protected. And I say this genuinely because I think there is different ways that men and women or gender expresses the value of land. Monetizing land, dividing land, stripping land, cultivating land, and then milking and massaging land and making sure that land continues to grow with you. So there's all these different ways that land is valued, and land was basically for us God. Land is where the food, the animals, the plants, the flowers, everything. Our land happens to be, this is the highlands in Kenya, and the slopes of Mount Kenya happens to have the reddest soils. It's very blood-like as well. So it has a quality of flesh and it also is extremely fertile and green and wet with rain, and all the clouds that bring the rain up to the mountain pour this rain in the land. So there was a real seductive pull towards the land from the British, who love to go and own up and grab up and take everything that they discover that can be a resource, and therefore in the colonization of that land, Christianity was also implanted very deeply, and in planting Christianity, there was also the severing and the destruction and the deep violation of traditions and religions that sat very perfectly with the land and our people and the language. So a Puritanism, a deep hypocrisy that made Kikuyu people and Kenyan people and African people despise their own body, their own faces, their own skin, their own hair, their own languages, arrived with this kind of introduction of a God that didn't look like us, a God that didn't like us, a God that didn't like what we used to do and how we used to speak. And so that, in a way, erases that body. It erases the body of your grandmother and grandfather, and it erases their faces. It erases their skin and their shininess and their everything. And exactly. And you're left with the fear of being who you are, the fear of God looking like who you look like. And so in the 12 years of Catholic school that I went to, I think one of the things that I didn't realize is how much I missed seeing the image of and the iconographic representation of us as admirable, of us as beautiful, of us as mystical and holy. And so I think in searching for a way to represent my people and my story and who I was, I began with the face and the body, and I began very esoterically. I was not particularly interested in kind of realistic representation. I was interested in how awkward it felt.
Yeah, so I wondered about that, because then there's the questions of the cyborg and there's the questions of transmutation, but it's almost like what we had accessible within certain spaces to express that moment of either awkwardness or accessing a different body. Like it's almost like real-time transmutation that we're offering in these hybrid bodies. But yeah, talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, I think it is a bit of time travel that I'm experiencing and also trying to get at. I'm trying to go very far back, and I'm trying to unearth and gather things that I have never seen and haven't been revealed to me, and I'm trying to push them forward and express them in a way that both charges them and positions them as urgent and impossibly present. But at the same time, there are things that I knew I had to invent the language for, right? And so the Alien series and all of these portraits with all these incredible colors have, mutations and mutilations and the patterning and the fractaling and all kinds of accentuations that are beyond human, that are superhuman, that are in awe of nature and animals and creatures and flowers that I love, that I consider to be of our land. And it's just questioning how can we remake ourselves? How can we make a new Mary, a new Virgin, a new whatever it is that we've been told to stare at, in search of God and the divine and eternity. That's where I was kind of messing with, and I was also listening to a lot of punk rock music, and but that's where the portrait and the figuration sort of began. It was really trying to assert an identity and a position that I hadn't seen and I was missing, and that hadn't been spoken of. And then I think what's eventually happened is that I've been able to work in Nairobi with materials that feel so, and I love that you are very much you touch things, and you're a hand-making artist. You love to use your hands and I see it. You see your hand in how the line moves and your work, and also how clear and deliberate your brain and your fingertips are. You can tell when someone's enjoying drawing, because it's like listening to how a note is played. You see that articulation, and it's intelligent drawing. It's also fun and balletic almost in how I see it in your work. And I think something pivoted when I encountered material that made me want to just hold and touch it and knead it like a yummy piece of bread, or like eating with your hands, or like playing with mud, which is essentially what I do all day, is play with mud.
Yes. It's the favorite part of sculpture.
It is
just like you're one with the environment.
Yeah, and it's not for everyone, but it works for me because I missed it, and I didn't know I missed it. But I didn't touch earth and mud and soil in New York City in the way I do, because I know what I'm handling when I pick up the soil and I pick up the clay and the earth in Kenya. I know this thing belongs to me. It's almost. I'm not religious. I belong to it. That's right. It's quite biblical, actually, and I'm not religious, but yeah.
Well, thinking of religion too, one of the things of modern Christianity or Protestant as a new iteration of Christianity is that it emphasized the singularity and emphasized the separation of self from other, and that you are just this encapsulated vessel, and there's a reverence to a thing outside of nature, mm-hmm. but you're singular, you're not interconnected. And part of the access to these different spaces is that we are quite literally interfaces.
I do honestly believe that there is a place that Christianity is an ancient religion, and I think that there's a place where Christianity shifts from being. First of all, I think the Judeo-Christian religions have an African root.
Oh, absolutely. And I love tracing them.
Yes. And I think in that origination place, there was a lot more of a connection to nature and to the earth, and also to the matrilineal. Yes. But I think with modernity and and with the Europeanization of the religion and many other aspects of spirituality, that disconnect was necessary in justifying some of the things that needed to happen, industrialization, and the separation of the need of that female quality. And I say that because I think there's a female in every man and a male in every woman, but that separation, I think, is part of what I'm also constantly tackling. How do we heal that? How do we heal that separation and that wound that has haunted us, still haunts us, right? That's why we're in war right now, because we are haunted by that separation between, and that lack of empathy between earth, land, and people. And so, yeah, I'm kind of obsessed with those years of being in Catholic school, but for very odd reasons, not because I'm in admiration. In fact, I think it was one of the most abusive kinds of educations, because it really forces you to progressively become less and less.
Yeah, it's
yourself.
A rough sanding machine. I remember even in my brief time in Catholic school in Dominican Republic, they would still do like the ruler slaps on the hand.
Yes.
Like by any means you will conform kind of thing, which is interesting to think of that being a desired space. Like if parents thought this is already such a violent world, and this will be the easiest transition to conformity for you. You can either be tumbled about in the world, and that was one of the, speaking of that, folklore. Because I know folklore was like the escape route for me, going to having the stories that would be told at bedtime countered to the normative things in Catholic school, where you're telling the big culture myth, like here's a thing we're all agreeing to now, and you will follow in this choreography, and then having the story at night that would be like, yes, you should follow that, but just in case you have this.
Who told you? Did you read the story?
So they would tell, like one of the central figures I always work with is Así Guapa, and she is like this badass female trickster, and most tricksters are usually male. And so this is like one depiction of my imagining of it. So she would always be told to me like a boogeyman story, like this is what
she's the one with the feet.
The feet backwards. Yeah. So if you essentially, so the stories would be like, this is what you should not be, young lady. You know, here's all the dangers of not following the rules. But she also gets to have backwards feet, so she's traceless. She gets to have a connected voice with nature. She is boundless. She gets to break karmic loads. And I'm like, wait, you're telling me this is a bad story? Like, what are the gives and takes? So to give you the normative and the sub-story all at once is one of my favorite things of folklore, that they're psychic tools. They're completely wonderful developments that we have around the world for navigating all of it.
And I think as an artist, to encounter these kinds of myths and characters is to encounter a metaphor of what it is to be an artist, to be these many multitudes of things at once, to have opinions that don't line up at the same time, be able to inhabit that singular person, to be able to express in ambidextrous ways a singular thing. That, for me, is one of the most incredible things about the mythologies that I love, but also the ones that I'm inventing, is that I'm trying to express how the potential of each and every one of us is to be multitudes of things, to be compassionate, rigorous, female and male, to be political, but also mystical, to be all of those things, right?
One does not exclude the other.
Correct.
That is like,
yeah, and that you can evolve and transform, and that's what these characters end up being so vilified for. Like, why aren't you
that
one
slippage
thing?
is like the biggest fear.
Yeah, like, you know, which is such a, and I completely am biased about this. It's such a female thing, that ability to change shape.
Oh, I could go deep into that. I mean,
Go.
no, it's kind of funny because I don't, you know Elial, but she was someone who loves reading natal charts. And she's like, we're astrologically entering a phase in the stars that cycles back to the pre-Bronze Age and pre-certain lineages of more patriarchic social structures, and how that is so terrifying now to have access to that kind of thinking. And all the things that seem like such bounty and potential for a free expressive self, for every self, seems like a threat. I cannot reconcile both. It's almost like the universe, the laws, everything is taking us to a cycle of awareness as a whole, and everybody's like, no, I want to stay as a single cell being. I don't want to evolve. Who wants land?
Well, I think the Earth is trying to express
It's
to us
radically
enough.
telling us, come on, join
get
in.
out of here if you're not gonna.
So it's just,
And it's interesting because we are the Earth. You know, it's telling us through us.
such fantasy to think
Right.
that we're in any way hierarchically above any of it. Our very cells are interdependent in all of it. It was kind of funny to be, I was in Japan while New York was getting the smoke from Canada. And people realizing that borders are artificial. Like, what do you mean we can't keep the smoke out? And it's just such constant, fantastical reimagining of the world in what is considered legal, what is considered proper. Like, we're so used to thinking of fiction as separate, and fiction is a daily enactment that we all agree on as we wake up. And it's just, if we have that skill, we can also find smart people to usher us slowly into something new. The only thing is that very smart people are using that same skill to usher many other realities. So, speaking of that, time being such a luxury, what do you think you can, because you actually do use time-based art, you do a lot of beautiful film, and that requires a certain viewing. How do you think you engage time? What time do you think you can give the viewer? If, I don't know, what's your relationship to time?
I mean, time is, talk about something that is complex to understand unless, and impossible to understand unless you're doing something. I mean, time is just reflecting on the thing that you're doing that started yesterday and is still going on. So what is time for me? I mean, very simply, I knew that the way I was raised, and the city I was raised in, you know, as a kid being in Nairobi, I was definitely a city kid, but I was also a city kid who had the privilege of a much smaller and more humanely paced life. You know, I never felt like like I feel now, like things are just kind of rushing along, and in a way, the minute I feel that I'm stressed because I can't finish things or complete my conversations or meet up with the people that I most value, I know something is off balance. And I remember realizing, and we were having this conversation in a very joking way, but I remember realizing that I'm spending time in cabs, in exchanges with people, in preparation of going to places, and that time is adding up to more time than I'm spending in meditation in front of my work, considering how I want to complete work that I'm obsessed with making, right? And I had to sit with that and go, well, what? Well, I'll figure it out. But you don't figure it out. You can't. There's only 24 hours in a day,
Yeah.
and that catching up for me is there's nothing to catch up. It's you know, we all have the sun comes up, the sun goes down, and we all have the same amount of time to figure out what to do with those hours and between that time, and so literally the moment I realized that when you're not in one place and you're in another, time feels different. I realized that my value system feels different, because now I'm in a place where the amount of solitude and serenity and also acceptance, meaning I'm not having to prove myself socially or professionally, because I'm just in my element, that I needed that. I needed to capture that somehow or another. And I do say this to a lot of young artists, we gravitate towards the big cities where art is extremely well valued and positioned and taken care of. But sometimes those cities are so cannibalistic, and they will put up the same fight to have you disappear as you might want to put into your work to have it appear. So you kind of have to make those choices. And so time is valuable, but it's valuable because you understand how in which way you can survive through it. And I'm also that person who, and this is not for everybody, who wanted to have kids. Sometimes I go.
It seems miraculous and extremely the most warrior badass thing you can do as an artist.
It's an absolute insane and
to
wonderful
thrive
thing.
and do.
It is. And I've learned so much, and I learn so much, and it humbles me so much. But, that's the other thing, is that, your work and your family, they pull you with intensity, They've no shame in how much they want you, And so making a decision about how you can exist with these gravities it's important to decide, if you want to do things well, if you want to be loving to your work, and if you want to be loving to the people who you need around you. And time is what it is. It's all you kind of divide it up and go, you get this much, and you can't do that in every single place, in every single way. And you have to make those decisions. And some of it is the decision to be a bit less visible, a bit less present for some. You kind of like scratch off a few people on the list that you used to hang out with, not because you don't love them, but because you have something else that you were placed here to do. And I truly believe that, you know. And do you feel like you have a role to play in this world, in this insanely painful world that we are living in this moment in time? Do you feel like you have a role to play and something that you are responsible for?
Well, that's a tricky question. So expressing, I don't know if I know exactly what I am. I know that I am being beckoned to, and that it seems vital and necessary, and I haven't the slightest clue what it is. So if someone told me, articulate what your role will mean 50 years from now, what is the space you're carving, what is the reality you're trying to build, or what kind of human do you want to be and model for other people? Zero clue on that. But in a more disassociative answer to your question, it's always interesting to me how time is something that is, whenever there's a big civilization, they'll try to colonize time. They'll reset the calendar to set the new time. And we're used to thinking of those as like very male, patriarchal spaces. But time is the first thing that is carved out. And then people are meant to work to contribute to that. And then in many ways dehumanize in that effort, like Augustus. There are so many periods in history where it's just like, nope, time starts with me, and I will make the world do that. And now we have that in a more granular way through media, where time is constantly conscripted and taken away. And I think as an artist, one thing that I hope to do is to carve out spaces for people to not be beholden to any of that linearity, and when you were talking about building these figures that seemed like capacious vessels, like things that could do many, many things and still exist as a singular being, like when I made my figures, they would be many times just a single thing in space, a blank void around them, but they were always in a point of transmutation. And I think it was that, trying to access a thing that gave room for deep interconnectedness and for the ability to exist forward and backward. Like, we are tortured by our time-traveling brain. We can never be in the present. That thing you were describing of being in a taxi and being like, God, I need to be doing this thing that I really love. And I always wanted to access. It's funny because we were talking about religion and Buddhism yesterday, and you're like, God, no, that doesn't. I'm always seduced by this idea of accessing the present in such a deep, pleasurable way, and those seem to be some of the tenets of that practice. Like, what are the things?
You forget yourself. You forget. You just are there and it when you're making.
Yes, and that's what the studio does. And I'm always like, wow, why didn't I get what? Whenever I'm busy doing all these things, or whenever I'm like hesitant to start a thing in the studio, and then I get to that space, I'm like, why did I wait so long? What took me so long to be in this here? When you're in the pause in between being in the zone, it's such a strange gift to just lose that altogether.
What a powerful act of freedom to be able to have that time, to be that present, and to essentially be able to express that complete singular peacefulness to the point that someone else will stop and stare at that thing that you were so present when you made, and that thing that you were so dedicatedly lost in when you created it, right? I mean, because I think that's what I feel I see in your work, but also in the work of people who similarly sit with something so long and so clearly and so
I remember being enraptured by
childlike
this one in
and-
particular. Like some of the work that you make, even just in the act of making in the viewing, that you give figures that are constantly, they're not so compact that the viewer, it's like a 1-2 punch. That's one of the things that bored me a little bit with the brown paperback portraits, where you get it. You're like, yes, I see what you mean, and then that's it. It's a language play. Whereas your images are just...
I wouldn't say that.
No, well, for me as a maker, it felt like that. And then other portraits felt like accessing the freedom that I'm trying to describe, like something like this, you're making as you're viewing. And I think artwork is most activated when it offers that for the viewer. Any work, for me, has to have that in it for it to be not just excellent, but like alive. Yeah.
I think, and maybe I'm making assumptions, but I think travel has played a role in being able to create that slippery and transparent and, feeling of here and there and questioning when you look at an image in our work. I think there's a certain amount of not necessarily being 100% confidently of this or of that, or still even in a loving, in a confident way, questioning where do we belong, and who do we belong to. Which I think is important because, to be honest, this assertion that we are forced to make, you belong here, you come from here, you are of this, that territorial aggression, I think, is at the root of our histories, that I think extremely nationalistic and masculine forcefulness, that flag, piercing behavior has created such pain, right?
Yes. Such isolation.
Absolutely. So in a way, some of the time-based work for me, the performances are also about expressing a kind of a spell, a real reverence to a witchery, a wizardry that I believe can only be not just captured, but also expressed in movement, in dance, in non-stagnation, in being here and there, and physically expressing that. And so, with a work like Eat Cake, the image that's up now, and Shushu, the possessedness, the possession of these women, the exorcism that they're trying to express is also the desperation that I feel when I'm trying to articulate how important it is for us to question where we belong and where we're going, and also to invite questions that make us feel less stable about it. Don't be too sure about it. And I think I'm definitely feeling the vibration of this god-awful wars that we're going through, all the way from what's happened in Sudan to what's happening in Ukraine to what's happening in Congo, and definitely in Palestine. It's that surety that is going to break us all, and then I'm not sure what the solution is, which is what I was sort of also trying to ask, if you feel an obligation or in any way responsible, or do we, or should we, you know, like what is our role in all of this?
And that's the thing. I think even if you don't, even Morandi was making work, even in those still lifes, anything is of its time. Anything reflects the moment. Even when you try to insulate, even when you try to shut it out, there is no escape from your time. Yeah. We are always, in every brushstroke, in every material choice, always reflecting what's around us. It's then just a question of how enmeshed do you want the work to be? Because I've seen work that tries to be hyper reflective of whatever's happening politically, and sometimes it's so ego-driven that it like misses the spirit of, or doesn't give you room to think beyond that moment. And so I wonder, as an artist, what are, like, you know, Picasso was such an egoic artist, but Guernica is such a powerful felt piece. So then it's, I think, as an artist, it's a matter of reflecting, but giving room for more, so that it's not bound to that particular thing. I don't know, what do you think is your, I know that I individually outside or privately will do many things that are different from what I would have in my work. And I think that's a room that we as beings have, that we can enact in the world in many different ways. So I don't, what do you think?
Yeah, no, it's
Firelei,
complicated.
Wangechi, can I?
Yes.
I hate that I'm doing this, but I appreciate how amazing this conversation is. But I also want to give our incredible guests and audience here a chance to ask some questions as well too. I am one person with a microphone, so if you raise your hand, just give me some time to get to you. But if somebody has some questions, let's see some hands, and I'll get a microphone over to you as quickly as I can. Oh.
We could also share one here.
Of course, it's the person on the exact opposite side of the theater.
First of all, thank you guys for being here. I had a question about a point, Wangechi, that you were making a little moment ago. You were talking about the both of your works and some semblance that they bear when the image is somewhat here and somewhat in another place. Do you ever have a sense of that you actually know that this work or yourself is not of this place and not necessarily in the interrogative zone, to speak?
I'm going to answer that like I know exactly what you asked me. So, no, I feel when I realized that I was actively entering the sphere of art making, and I was deliberately going to be an artist, that I was going to be channeling. I just knew it. I knew because I didn't have too many. For example, like I said, the way I was raised, the schools I went to, I didn't have a particular person I was looking at and going, that's what I want to be like and that's what I want to do. I didn't have any doubt that I was going to be able to do this for the rest of my life. But I also knew that because again, I was a young girl during the dictatorship and during a lot of censorship and a lot of silence, a lot of secret keeping, both for all the right reasons, because in the end, the freedom fighters' oaths, the Mau Mau's the bond that they made to the country was, if there is no justice and freedom, then we will continue the fight. And that was supposed to be until the land was ours, but also that freedom was ours. So that those secrets were not talked about, and all of that was how I was raised. We were not extremely expressive about anything controversial or too traditional about where we come from, or too spiritual about who our gods were, or to anything. And so in finding the language that made me feel most human, most alive, most strong, most grounded, and most powerful, I found that it spoke of something prior to my birth, my mother's birth, my grandma. It spoke of, let me bring all of these voices to the forefront, and let them use me, and try my best to lift me up and to lift everyone else who may not have said what they ought to have said, who kept silent in order to be powerful, in order to find a mechanism to survive even. And it's quite different from something about the beauty and the trajectory of African Americans specifically, articulation and history, but it was how I came to art. I wanted to perform. I wanted to be on stage. I had all these little dreams. I thought that I, could try and aspire to. And then each time when those things got knocked down, it's like, no, you can't do that. You won't do that. Eventually, I ended up in this, what I thought was a corner, but then I opened up the door and it's this massive room, and it was the room of an art maker. And in art making, I can move and pull from dreams, from subconscious, from memories, from intuition, from spirituality, from nuggets of things that I hear and tie them together, from the books that I read and all of that. So, no, I know I'm of here, and I know of here can sometimes be, many different things. But I also know that I am pulling the words and the voices from very far back in history.
Looking for hands. All right, got one up front.
Getting your cardio today.
I'm going to get some help from the audience to pass this over.
Okay. I'm going to prerequisite this with just by saying there's so much going on in my brain now. Right now, I might not be able to even properly translate what's going through. But I think one word that keeps coming to my mind, and that I, particularly in my stage of life right now, I'm using as a tool in my brain and in my psychology and in my art making, is world building. that was mentioned from the very beginning of like creating not only just pieces, but creating whole dimensions within what you're doing. And I guess I get the sense of like there's a sense of fear that I get when I think of the world building that has already been made and the game has started and I just got put into it. But there's also the world building that I get to do in my head. And so I guess I'm just fascinated with what kinds of emotions you use to process mapping and making that kind of world building element in both of your work.
Yeah, so I guess the thing about world building is that I lean very strongly on my subconscious, dreams, moments just outside your vision, because so much of what is, if I try to make out of what I can only see directly, then I'm limiting it to the filters of what's already been imposed on me. So it's almost like you have to trust things that are not comfortable or things that feel like joyful, but you have no idea why. Like leaning into that, because those will be many times outside the norm of what people want you to, or what's been given to you as a proper path.
I mean, I think there's a part of why I dedicate so much time to doing this that has to do with the rage I don't want to get into. I don't want to be that person that is.
There's so much kindling that we could just be
goodness.
bonfires all the time.
It's crazy how badly we've continued to treat ourselves, each other, and this world, fully knowing what is the result of such heinous, mean behavior, and we are in full-blown articulation of that cruelty right now. And we've seen what it does. We've seen what, suffering and torture and all of that. So I have a lot of my emotion tends towards, getting upset about things that I see that are unfair, that are, just unjust, and especially when it makes no damn sense and we know so much better than we, and there's so much to share. But everything that we have fought for has not been implemented, and we, men and women, are not in equal power, and that's a huge problem. If we want a world where decisions are made for the future, for children, for nature, for the well-being of our rivers and our soil, we need women to join in the power that it takes to rule the countries that are completely obliterating other countries. We need different cultural histories and practices to be involved in those decisions, because many of the most powerful, most wealthy, most supposedly superior in capital countries have no understanding of compassion and empathy and balancing the resources of the earth, this is all we have, right? So you can't have 1% or 9% or whatever percent of the wealth in one community, in one group, in one type of person. We know this. It's so simple. It's actually quite stupid how simple it is.
Yeah, that'd be diagnosed as illness in the body. Like,
correct.
You'd go into triage and automatically.
But we're not. And I say we're not because we haven't succeeded in convincing the wealthy, the male, the most aggressive, the most hostile, that's not the path we should go towards, right? So we're gonna pummel and kill and torture and squeeze the most vulnerable and the ones who are suffering already. And then we're going to talk about the ones that we're interested in talking about and not the things that are not interesting, right? So there's a lot of suffering outside of the wars that we're hearing about in the news in Palestine and in Ukraine. There's a ton of suffering and we're not hearing about it. So, I know that I could spend all day angry and upset and also distracted. But I really truly believe, and these are Toni Morrison's words and many other thinkers who I deeply respect and who have cleared so much of that forest so that I can walk a bit more gently. That this is why we are artists. So we work and we say and we express and we live the reality not just in articulating and speaking and screaming, but in witnessing through our work what is happening. And I just pray through the work. I pray and I meditate and I cry through the work that things will get better. But I'm not sure right now. It seems pretty hopeless and pretty painful. But I do honor the gift of being able to delve deep and to sit with ideas and to be calm in the simplicity of a gesture and the molding of a shape, and to honor something that put me here, and the divine that makes us able to continue, And I pray for peace. I pray for those who are suffering. I pray for everything that I'm powerless to do more, but. It's a crazy time, and I don't have a solution, but I think we know. Even those who act like they don't know, they know. They know
deeply. Yeah. Well, I think too, as a maker, it's a bit because if we are transmuting energy, it's almost then you have to focus on what world you want to make and what energy you have to really channel when you're making. We have such a boundless source of negative energy, which is powerful, and you can make very vigorous work out of it. But are you just perpetuating and constructing something new that is the same? Or what is the thing that I try to focus on? The energy of the world I want to make, or what I want to amplify whenever I'm making. So even if you are very aware of every single thing that is destroying the world, you have to counter that energy with what you want to make anew, which is sometimes boring or hard and very challenging. Yep.
So we're just about at the end of our time. I wanted to also just share that these two incredible artists just didn't walk out here without knowing each other. We've put a lot of time into making this a rich, complex, diverse conversation. Just to end it, I was hoping just quickly you might each share just something surprising, incredible, just something that you didn't know about one another that you learned through this process?
I am a meta fan. What would I not? No. No, I'm just delighted that. Oh, this is gonna be so geeky. That we were able to actually like speak, and that you were like, oh, so welcoming. I don't know if that makes sense. That you were not like, who is this Rube? Why am I in the room with her?
You're so ridiculous.
But that is what I'm really
No,
delighted
this
at.
is just a joy. Thank you for doing this, for putting this together, and for having the courage and the I don't know what possessed you to do it, but thank you for.
A lot of people ask the same thing.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Chris.
No, it's great. It's really nice, and it's. I was saying this earlier to one of the ladies in the reception. I was saying that we don't get to see each other in New York. We travel a lot. We work a lot, and sometimes when you invite artists out to some far-flung place, not only are we so grateful and surprised at how beautiful this amazing museum is, and the reception and the warmth has been wonderful, but it becomes an opportunity for us to share and to build a sisterhood that we already have the basis for, and so I'm actually so thankful to have time with Firelei, and also to meet you in this iteration. You said we met in Hong Kong, and I didn't remember that, but no, it's why we do what we do. It's community, it's friendship, it's the continuation of these conversations. It's part of what art is just to keep the humanity moving around, and thank you all for the questions as well, and for sitting through it, and we'll see you out there somewhere.
And thanks to the students for showing us your work today.
Yes.
It was great meeting you.
Thank you all.